I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, the ongoing furor over the Netanyahu government's decision not to implement the compromise deal, which would have created a third section of the Western Wall that would be egalitarian, so that men and women could stand together, and so that women would be free to wear a tallit, a prayer shawl, or read from the Torah. I'm sure most of you know that non-Orthodox streams of Judaism, especially those here in America, most notably the Reform and Conservative movements, have been fighting against the monopoly of power held by the ultra-Orthodox in Israel, and which is concretized in the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel, which exercises total control over matters of personal status and observance in the State of Israel. And the Orthodox rabbinate takes the position that all streams of non-Orthodox Judaism are inauthentic perversions of real Judaism. And therefore, only Orthodox rabbis approved by the Orthodox rabbinate may officiate at weddings in Israel, may perform conversions in Israel. In fact, conversions performed by unapproved rabbis in America are not recognized by the rabbinate of Israel, which obviously creates all kinds of problems for American Jews converted by a Reform rabbi or a conservative rabbi, should the convert wish to make Aliyah. And the Orthodox want to control the way Shabbat and festivals are celebrated in Israel, how kashrut is implemented in Israel. And only approved Orthodox synagogues, rabbis, and yeshivot currently receive funding from the Israeli government. So the issue of the Western Wall is symptomatic of a much wider challenge facing the State of Israel today. The Western Wall, which we all know from iconic photos like the one you see right now of the Western Wall Plaza, is administered by the rabbinate as an Orthodox synagogue. Men and women are separated by a mechitza, a dividing partition, and women are forbidden to wear a tallit or read from the Torah. So the head of the Jewish agency, Natan Sharansky, worked out a compromise solution that there be constructed at another spot along the same Western Wall a third egalitarian section near what's known as Robinson's Arch. And the Netanyahu government agreed. But when it came time to implement the compromise, the Orthodox parties in Netanyahu's coalition government threatened to leave the coalition if the Sharansky plan was implemented. And if the Orthodox parties were to leave the coalition would no longer have the requisite majority of 61 seats in the 100-seat Knesset, and consequently, the government would fall. And so Benjamin Netanyahu, who'd promised to implement the Sharansky compromise plan, acceded to the threat of the Orthodox parties, and his cabinet voted not to go forward at this time with completion of construction of the third egalitarian section of the Western Wall, known as, again, Robinson's Arch. In addition, the Orthodox parties insisted that they maintain total control over the conversion process and the authority to determine which conversions will be considered Jewishly acceptable in the State of Israel. An American jury went ballistic. Coincidentally, the Board of Governors of the Jewish Agency was meeting in Jerusalem when the Netanyahu cabinet declared it was postponing the implementation of the Sharansky compromise, so that many American Jewish leaders were in Israel at the time, and they expressed universal outrage. The outrage was over a very simple principle, which seems obvious to virtually all of world Jewry, including many Orthodox rabbis in America and in Israel. The principle is Israel is the Jewish state for all the Jewish people. And every Jew, Orthodox, non-Orthodox, secular, should have the same status and privilege in the Jewish state. Now, some American Jewish leaders, such as Rabbi Rick Jacobs, who heads the Reform Movement's congregational arm, the URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism, canceled a scheduled meeting with Mr. Netanyahu. And the Jewish Agency disinvited the Prime Minister from a gala that was originally planned to be held that night. And there are those in the American Jewish community who are now suggesting American Jewry should distance itself from the State of Israel or withhold funds. There are those like Daniel Gordis of the Shalem Institute who advocate American Jews use the power of the purse to force Israel to change its policies. So what do we make of this entire issue? Well, one of world Jewry's most respected and articulate voices did in fact choose to meet with the Prime Minister even while some of his colleagues were canceling their meetings. Jerry Silverman is the highly regarded President and CEO of the JFNA, the Jewish Federations of North America, the organization which basically supports Jewish life in North America and distributes funds donated by individual Jews to organizations that sustain Jewish life here in America and in Israel. You've seen Jerry very often here on JBS. You know that I have enormous regard and affection for him. And Jerry joins us now on our JBS phones. Jerry, thank you for being part of JBS once again.
Mark, it's a pleasure to be on the JBS network. You do such a magnificent job of reporting all that is happening in the Jewish world.
Okay, Jerry, first of all, why did you decide you would meet with the Prime Minister after his cabinet scuttled the Western Wall compromise while so many of your colleagues were canceling their meetings?
I was in Israel with my chairman, Richard Sandler, with Federation execs from around the country, and with Jewish Agency leaders from around the world. And this rupture was happening around us, and this perfect storm hit of both of these issues within an hour of each other with very little notice. And thinking about it and talking to my colleagues and to leadership, it became apparent that the response was significantly not just overwhelming, the outrage, the shock that something like this could happen on the same day, an hour apart from one another, one in the ministerial committee in the Knesset, one in the cabinet meeting. We felt strongly that we wanted the opportunity to have a tachlis dialogue with the Prime Minister so that he could hear direct from a few of our federations directly what the reaction was, and the reaction was happening within their communities. And we felt it was important both to express our outrage, to express our absolute shock that this would occur after 5 years of good faith negotiating. It would happen to Natan Sharansky, who, led the process of which we were intimately involved in, and felt that it was an opportunity to speak very openly and direct to the Prime Minister and his staff. And I will share with you that that what I can share with you about the meeting is it was extremely open from a point of what was shared.
What does that mean?
And there's no question that listening, very strong listening was going on, because I think it took the Israeli government by surprise at the reaction from the diaspora community.
Jerry, are you suggesting that Netanyahu did not know what the reaction of American Jewry would be?
I don't think that he expected, or that the government and the cabinet expected the volume that came from all corners of the diaspora, and that came especially from all corners of the U.S. I do not think they expected it to be as forceful and as loud as it was. No, I don't. I think it was. I think they did not expect the level of emotion and passion and commitment to the promise that Israel is the nation state for all Jews.
Yes.
And that's the expectation that we have.
Absolutely. But it's very, I don't doubt, look, you met with him, you sat with him, and you were able to gauge eye to eye whether the Prime Minister was surprised. My own sense is this is a man who very, very well knows American Jewry, has seen this issue dealt with and grappled with for more than 5 years. Then, lo and behold, a compromise is worked out, which he endorses. If you're right, what it says about the Israeli inner circle, the Prime Minister, and major individuals in his cabinet, that they were taken by surprise, is shocking to me, Jerry. And it raises, but there's so much more to talk about, but it raises for me an entire, if you're right, it raises for me an entirely different issue that should concern you as a major Jewish leader and American Jewry as a whole. So I'm going to press you one more time. Are you sure Netanyahu didn't see this coming? And that basically what he had was he was in an impossible situation. He had to choose between seeing his government fall or enraging American Jewry, and he chose, Jerry, what seems to me to be the only choice he had, as onerous and as obnoxious as it was. Anyway, that's my reaction. What do you think?
So I think that I don't want to overreact by the surprise, by the outcry of diaspora Jewry, because remember I said this is a perfect storm.
Yes.
You had the Kotel issue, of which the Prime Minister was the one who went to Natan Sharansky.
Yes.
It's not that the Reform Movement or Women of the Wall or Conservative Movement or Federations or the Jewish Agency went to the Prime Minister. He came to them and said, I need you to help solve this problem.
Right.
And at the GA, 3 years ago, he proclaimed that we were going to solve the problem, we were going to implement the plan, and one wall for all Jewish people.
Yes.
So he set the expectation. And if you take that in conjunction with tying the question of who is a Jew,
yes,
within 1 hour of each other, and that's where I believe when you take them both together as this concept of a Hurricane Sandy or a perfect storm, that's when you brought those two together all at once, it galvanized the community, to a whole new level. And I don't know that they could have or should have anticipated it altogether. But it came together like that, and as I said before, I don't think they expected the volume, but I also don't think they expected these things to happen together. And when those two came together at the same time, is when you saw things just move to a whole new decibel level.
Are you able to tell us anything the Prime Minister said to you which was in some way hopeful to you?
So, the Prime Minister and his team have suggested they wanted to work out both issues, and through some incredibly challenging and hard work with his team, with Minister Bennett, who was incredibly supportive through the process and available and accessible, who's the diaspora minister, through working with the Kulonu party, Kachlon's party, as well as Avigdor Lieberman, who was the first one that came out with outrage about this, and his party. We were able to come up with at least a solution to take the conversion side of the issue and postpone it for 6 months. And the Prime Minister is setting up a committee that will hopefully take seriously the issues and try to solve the issues without having either legislation, or Supreme Court petitions.
Okay, I understand.
And so that was at least taken off the table for the next 6 months with an initiative to try to discuss it. So that did occur while we were there through some incredibly hard work and with all of the parties, including the Reform Conservative movements in Israel, as well as Natan Sharansky.
Okay.
So that's number one. And on the Kotel issue, there's some challenges. Now, the Prime Minister has said he wants to move forward with the prayer space. But the agreement was really three parts: the entrance, the governance of the South Kotel, which is really the management of it, and the prayer space. And he's only willing right now to go forward with the prayer space, and there's real concerns about that.
I understand.
And so that's still a really, large open issue to our community.
It may be that you simply can't tell us. And you already said at the beginning you can tell us what you can tell us. And I respect that. I was wondering if he said to you, Jerry, first of all, I'm sorry. And second, Jerry, I had no choice. Can you tell us if he either...
No, I can't talk about any of that.
Fine. I'll ask it in a different way. From your perspective, is Netanyahu the bad guy here? Did he have a choice?
He's definitely not the bad guy. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with a situation, I believe, and I respect all of the parties because, our goal is the concept of one community, to build community, an inclusive community. And when we're dealing with a Shas party and a United Torah Judaism party of very traditional Orthodox people who truly in their heart believe that non-Orthodoxy is an existential threat to the state of Israel and to what they believe in. And in no way can they ever be recognized in Israel, either through conversion or through government committees, etc. That's the heart of the issue.
Yes. By the way, you say it so well. I want to say to you, Kol hakavod to you. I was so proud when I read that Jerry Silverman said, we're here representing the Jewish people, and the state of Israel is our state, and I'm not going to avoid, in fact, I'm going to make sure I meet with the Prime Minister, even if it's only to express the extent to which this is so upsetting to American Jewry. I give you enormous credit for that, and not only that, on behalf of American Jewry that you do represent. And people have to understand, the Jewish Federation system is the umbrella organization that supports so much of what Jewish life is, and you are president and CEO, so you represented me. And I want to thank you. From me, and I hope I'm speaking for much of the JBS audience, you had courage to do something which at the moment there was hysteria all around you, and you took a very responsible and I feel a very Jewish tact, and I wanted to say that publicly to you. And all the way you frame the issue is exactly right. And I have one more question for you. There are Jewish leaders now who are saying American Jewry will distance itself from Israel. And they're not saying to their constituencies, don't let that happen. There are Jews who are saying they're going to withhold money from Israel. A story in the New York Times where a man had pledged $1 million in Israel bonds. He wants it back. And I am troubled, and then I want to hear what you have to say. I'm troubled when American Jewish leaders don't say to American Jewry, whether we agree or disagree with a given policy, the state of Israel represents the Israeli people and is critical to our own Jewish identities. We may be angry. We may express that anger. We may protest. We may argue for our position. The one thing we may never do is step back from Israel or withhold financial, political, or emotional support from our family in the state of Israel. That's my feeling. I want to know the extent to which you feel comfortable with what I'm saying or whether you see it differently.
You know, President Shimon Peres, Zichrono Livracha, used to say that the Jewish people's greatest strength is we're a people of dissatisfaction.
Yes.
And our greatest weakness is we are a people of dissatisfaction.
Yes.
And I think of that often, and I do miss him. And I look at what has occurred, and it's emotional. It truly is emotional. You have, literally, if you think about 2 million Reform Jews in America, you look at 1 million conservative Jews, you look at numbers of modern Orthodox who are upset about this, people in Israel who are upset about this. People are reacting. They're reacting emotionally. When I talked to Rabbi Jacobs told me last Friday, Erev Shabbat, he was at the Kotel, and a newspaper or media person asked him directly, well, how do you feel? And he says, what do you mean how I feel? I'm at the Kotel. I'm spending Shabbat in Israel. I'm spending Shabbat with young people. He said, what could be greater than this? And I have thought about that, listen, we're going to be angry and we're going to move forward and we're going to resolve this situation and people are going to be emotional. But at the heart of it, and I mean at the heart of it, Israel is a miracle in our lifetime. We waited 2,000 years for it. I believe at the absolute heart and soul that diaspora Jewry is not going to, in any way, shape, or form, walk away from Israel. We're going to stand up for ourselves because we have shown an unbelievable love of Israel, and we have an expectation that Israel should love us back. as American Jews and diaspora Jews who support Israel. But I think at the end of the day, we will get to a resolution, and we will get through this emotional time of feeling devalued, and then move forward. So I think we're seeing reaction. I think we will move forward and be very challenging to move forward in a positive direction. We'll do it with respect as we move forward, and we'll never do it to do it in any way that will tarnish this miracle that we have, because we have to preserve it for the next generation and the next generation.
Jerry, you are delicious. I can't thank you enough for all the support you've given to me personally. And I say once again, kol hakavod to you. It is not simply now that you met with the Prime Minister, and that was a statement you made. But the way you just articulated it is what I hope every person in a position of leadership in the Jewish community, whether they're a rabbi, whether they're an institutional organizational leader like yourself, or whether they simply have influence among other Jews. I hope all of us learn from exactly the way you're approaching the problem. It is a problem. It needs to be dealt with. The American Jewish community must continue to argue for its position, and people like you will lead us in communicating our views to the State of Israel. But what you're doing is a marvelous service to the Jewish people and to the State of Israel and to all of us. And I thank you very much always. I've got to get you in studio so we can talk about this longer, but I thank you for giving us some time here tonight.
I'm truly believe I'm privileged to work on behalf of the Jewish community. It's truly a privilege, and it's always an honor to be part of JBS.
Thank you, my friend. You be well.
Thank you.
The thoughts of Jerry Silverman, President and CEO of the Jewish Federations of North America. I think he just says it beautifully. By the way, if you're on the JBS email list, you probably saw the op-ed piece I wrote suggesting that it would be inappropriate for American Jews to try to stronghold the Israeli people by withdrawing financial, political, or emotional support. You can read my piece on the JBS website or on the World Jewish Daily website, which also ran my article, which was in response to Daniel Gordis. I hope all of you, by the way, receive the JBS email every Sunday. If you aren't, go to the JBS website, give us your email address, and every Sunday you'll get an update about what programming is coming up here on JBS. As always, my thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, JBS's Associate Director, Dara Golub, editors, Dennis Golan and John McDevitt, and the producers of this edition of In the News, Carol Lilienthal and Jan Weiss. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.